Coach John Tower, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. I got an extra big smile on my face today because I got a Tommy finally coming on the podcast. So go St. Thomas, go Tommies. Welcome to the show. I'm excited for the conversation today.
Hey, thanks, DJ. Appreciate being on and really looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely loved your book. It's from 2015. I wish I would have got my hands on this earlier. It's such a book of gems. And you coined the term WASP, well intentioned, over involved sports parent. What does that mean? Can you paint a picture of what it looks like and what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, it was certainly a labor of love. I went to St. Thomas, graduated here, and went off to grad school to get my doctorate in social psychology. And I was really fortunate at the time. I started basketball camps at St. Thomas my senior year of college with my roommate, Mike Bergen. And so he ended up going to the financial services. I just kept running basketball camps. So the last 30 years, I've run these camps and did a lot of the motivation research that served as the basis for my dissertation. And so sort of, I had this interesting life of teaching psychology and running camps and then starting to coach at St. Thomas in 2000. And, it's like anything in life, whatever you expose yourself to, you sort of become. And I don't know many things in life, but social psychology and basketball, maybe two of them. And I kept seeing, sort of this thread of really nice parents, but who were a little overprotective of their kids. And it was not at all malicious, right? I think all of us see the news stories, the really egregious, dad runs out of the stands and punches a referee, or, the stories that's like, okay, we can all agree those are bad. This was sort of the more insidious, like the parent who's looming over their kid who isn't really that sad, but they're feeling more sad because mom or dad won't let them go. And so, as I just kept seeing dozens and dozens of anecdotes, I had, and mind you, I was in the midst of raising boys. So we have four kids, but the oldest is 22. And so I was also in the midst of this. So we always joke research is me search. Well, I was also looking at this like, hold on a second. As much as I'm saying these other parents are overdoing it, my kid's in T-ball at 2, he's at my basketball camp at 3, he's playing soccer at 4. I'm like, what am I doing? And where did our social calendar go? And so it was sort of this confluence of events. And it took a long, long time to write the book. I mean, I don't want to tell you how many years it actually took because, you get writer's block and you got other stuff going on in life. But it really became this thing where I don't want to act like I have all the answers. It's more, I've just seen so much over 30 years. And hence the title WASPs, well-intentioned, over-involved sports parents. Well-intentioned is absolutely genuine, that these are parents who want to do right by their kids. And over-involvement, well, we know from thousands of studies, neglectful or under-involved parents are not good either. So again, the intentions are good, but it's okay, when is enough too much? And particularly in the world of youth sports, the beauty of sports, I think, is it's at least when done well, it's like the social experiment where kids can fall, they can get hurt, they can fail, they can lose, they can get cut, and it actually prepares them for the rest of their lives. And if we shield kids from those experiences, that's where I think we're actually doing potentially a lot of damage.
I love what you said in a podcast once that sports are not a landing pad, they're a launching pad. And that's been with me ever since I've heard you say that. I mean, what a great opportunity to look at sport, not as a landing pad. It's not the end all be all. It's a launching pad.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for all of us, and the social psychologist in me, when we're watching our kids play, hey, they're the most important thing to us. And so it makes sense that I'm not happy with an umpire calling a strike or a referee calling a foul or my kid not playing quite as much. And so I think trying to reframe what are the goals of youth sports? And actually, when you ask parents on surveys, what are your goals for youth sports? They're incredibly noble goals. They talk about character development, competitiveness, teamwork, perseverance, handling adversity, yeah, all the things that we would hope sports would teach. But then in that moment, and when you do surveys of coaches and say, hey, what do you usually get emails from parents about? The two words we hear over and over, playing time. And so that launching pad idea is that, to me, and I'm not perfect by any means, but I try to think about that as, okay, I'm watching my kids play sports. Are they going to make millions and millions of dollars playing professional sports? No. And if they do, it's not going to be because I'm yelling at them, kick the ball, Jack, kick the ball, Jack. Like, no, that's no kid have I ever seen respond better in a soccer game when their mom or dad's like, kick it, Jack. It's like, no, the window to kick it just ended. Um, but that launching pad area, it's like, what do we want them to be like when they're 22 years old? And I know for me, I was blessed with a lot of great coaches, not just at the college level, but high school and even youth sports. many of the most painful lessons I learned were also the most powerful ones and impactful ones. In fact, I was just texting with my 10th grade baseball coach earlier this morning, and he was one of the most impactful people in my life, not because he told me what I wanted to hear, he told me what I needed to hear. And he's going into a Hall of Fame here in St. Paul tonight. So I texted him, and we just had this wonderful text exchange. But it was one of those moments where, like, as a sophomore in high school, he held a mirror up to me. I was like, hey, this is the road you're going down. It wasn't like I was getting in trouble. It was more like, if you really want to be a varsity high school baseball player, you're going to need to change some things. And that was not fun to hear. It didn't make me feel good in that moment, but it changed the way that I operated. And to this day, I'm really grateful for it.
We have a lot of sports parents that tune into the show. What are some signs and symptoms that a parent might be a WASP, a well-intended, over-involved sports parent? What are some signs and symptoms that you would say, yep, I would put you maybe in that category?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one would be if you start to feel stressed about your kids' sports. I think we all got to step back, and that stress could come from scheduling, right? Where you're like, we are just
Mhm.
ridiculously overscheduled, which is a part of our culture, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? That I don't need to have my kid playing local little league and on a travel team and have a personal trainer. That's You don't have to do all that. You might feel sometimes like, well, am I keeping up with everybody else? But I think that's one thing. If stress starts to kind of override the joy of sports, that's a big problem. I think worrying about performances. So if I'm going to a game and I'm getting um, upset or angry or frustrated about things completely out of my control, and that could be my kid's performance, it could be an umpire's call, it could be a coach. Why aren't you starting my kid at shortstop? Why is he out in right field? I think that would be another thing. And then the third thing is, if I hear myself saying the same things over and over and over again to my kids, and they're kind of giving me the I know, well, I'm overdoing it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look back at how youth sports started, most of it was, I mean, police athletic leagues, police saying literally, what are we going to do to keep kids off the streets at 2:30 and give them some degree of organization? Because teenagers left to their own devices from 2:30 p.m. till 6, a lot of them are knuckleheads, right? You and I may have been knuckleheads when we were young. So let's give them some place to run around and play. And when you look at the evolution of youth sports over the last century, this is not what anybody had in mind. And so I think the symptoms for a parent, if probably the simplest one, you take your temperature. If youth sports is causing you more stress, that's a problem. If it's stressing you financially from a time schedule perspective, versus, oh, we're going to go down to the Little League field tonight. We're going to hang out with some friends. We're going to watch. Billy's going to have a couple at bats. He's probably going to strike out in one. He's probably going to walk in the other. He's going to have ice cream after the game. And you know what? That's just fine. And so keeping that perspective, I think that would be kind of the overall holistic way I'd look at it.
Yeah. Well, I think about it's such an interesting topic, right? Because when you talk about it's hard to be a coach, it's hardest now more than ever to be a coach. It's hardest to be a referee right now. I mean, we're losing coaches, we're losing referees. It's getting harder and harder with social media and everything else that goes with it. We're begging people to come out and be reps, and we have a huge referee shortage, at least in the Minnesota area in basketball and in football. It's not easy. How can coaches do a better job at partnering with the parents? I think about this visual of being across the table from somebody, and it's very argumentative and it's conflict. But when we sit on the same side of the table, it's very much we're in this together and we're partnering together. I think the best coaches are the ones that can partner with the parents of the athletes on their team. What do you think are the best strategies for the coaches out there to partner with the parents?
Yeah, coaching, I mean, coaching is really hard. Officiating games is really, really hard. And I say that as somebody who, from time to time, questions officials' calls in Division One basketball. The I think the things we have to remember as coaches, first and foremost, we have a tremendous responsibility. And does winning matter? Absolutely. And at the higher levels, it matters a lot. But keeping in mind, what are the goals of youth sports? It's just, to me, it's like a mission statement for a company. What are we here doing? And we're not here producing professional athletes. Like, that just isn't what happened. Joe Mauer, there's a chapter in the book on Joe Mauer and his family. And I interview his parents. And it was a wonderful 3 hour interview with Jake and Teresa. It was also, and I say this in a complimentary way, wildly boring, in the sense that, like, there were no magic tricks up their sleeve. Like, they raised Jake Mauer and Billy Mauer and Joe Mauer, and a lot of it was through love, through discipline, through get out of the house, go to the local playground. Joe got beat up by his older brothers a lot of the time, metaphorically, and it just, when you listen to how they raised him, they were not trying to raise the next Joe Mauer. They were trying to raise really good kids. And the best litmus test of that is, okay, Joe signed a $180 million contract, or whatever it was. Jake and Billy didn't, but you go look at how well adjusted Jake and Billy are. You're like, okay, something went on inside those walls where, regardless of whether and Jake and Billy were both very, very good players, right? They played minor league baseball. Um, so I think as coaches, we need to orient and then reorient parents to, these are the goals that we're trying to accomplish. And also, like most things in life, set expectations low. And when I mean low, I mean your kid's not going to play every minute. They're going to have bad games. They're going to have good games. Reminding parents at the outset of the season, not in the middle of the season when tempers are flaring, but at the outset of the season, one of the joys of sports is there are going to be inevitable ups and downs during the course of a season. And when those happen, your best opportunity as a parent is during those darkest days, during the times where maybe your kid gets cut, maybe he or she loses a starting spot, maybe they miss a clutch free throw, whatever it might be. Those are actually the opportunities as parents where we get to put our arms around our kids, and we don't necessarily just try to make them feel better. It's balancing that, okay, this hurts. I'm here to support you, but let's talk about how you're feeling. And let's talk about ways that maybe you can avoid this in the future. If all we do is try to protect our kids from feeling badly, they're going to feel badly in life. And if you don't get those practice reps as a teenager, the world's going to hit you pretty quickly at age 22, 23, and then you're not going to have the coping skills. And so I think as a coach, the more we can do to have that conversation, and again, not minimize winning, but say, yeah, we're going to try to win, but let's keep the big picture in mind. I mean, one of the other things I like to do is just a statistical exercise. When you look at the percent of kids, right, who, if you take a big high school, you went to Lakeville South, you take a Lakeville South, a Wayzata, and Eden Prairie, and you look at all the kids, whatever sport it is, I'll go with basketball, all the kids in basketball and in first, second, third grade. And there's hundreds of them, right, at every level. And then you go look at senior night at those schools, and usually there's about 4 or 5 seniors on the team, but maybe only 1 or 2 start. So you go back to when those kids were in second grade and there were 200 of them in the gym. If you were to tell the parents, hey, forget about the NBA, forget about college, probably 2 of these 200 will be starting on senior night. So the other 198, what are we going to do to make sure this is a positive experience and there's lessons learned? Because then you take the 2 who are starting on senior night, the odds they're playing Division I basketball are really low. The odds that a Division I basketball player plays in the NBA are really low. And let's be honest, some of that's genetically driven. If you're not 6'6", 6'7", the odds of playing in the NBA go down dramatically. If you're not really, really fast, you don't jump high, the odds go down dramatically. And so just trying to level set for parents, like, listen, I mean, I sometimes when I give talks to parents, sometimes I'm very blunt and just say, listen, you need to assume your kid is not going to play professionally and not going to play college. Actually, you should probably assume they're not going to play high school. And so often you'll hear kids in grade school at our camp, sometimes kids, they'll say, what's your dream? They'll say, play Division I basketball. Well, I'm a firm believer you can't dream about playing Division I basketball if you haven't yet played high school basketball. You don't know what that means. And so just getting parents, at the end of the day, parenting is hard. Can we take it a day at a time? Because every day, the old adage that the days are long and the years are short, it's very true. And just try to enjoy each of those daily moments, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. In my consulting work, John, working with high school teams in the Midwest, one of the consistent kind of battles I see from head coaches is having conversations with parents who, this might sound a little bit aggressive, but a little delusional. What I mean by delusional is they think their kid is a lot better than they really are. And that's something that I see time and time again. These coaches are having these conversations because the parent, for, their own reasons, they think their kid is the best and much better than they are. What does the conversation, coach, look like, or what advice would you give to the coaches listening that are dealing with parents who are a little bit delusional on how good their student athlete actually is? What does that look like? What advice do you have there?
Yeah, and you talked earlier about the alignment piece, and I think that's important. And clearly, coaching at the Division I level, we're working with guys who are 18 to 23. But I think in social psychology, there's 2 basic principles: is how we navigate our world. We want to see the world accurately, right, and sort of be realistic, and we also like to feel good and have fun and make friends, etc. So there's the social need of what feels good right now, and then there's the reality of that doesn't feel so good. And as parents, not surprisingly, which one wins out? Usually the feel good one, right? And so I'm going to see through rose colored lenses. My kid goes 2 for 10, and I'm going to have reasons why, well, they should shoot more or they should play more. And another parent's kid's hardly playing, and they have reasons. That is what we do as parents, right? We look out for our kids, and we do not like to see them in pain. Um, where I think parents can become unrealistic and even delusional is recognizing uh, just how competitive it is. We tell our college guys all the time, we're like, listen, your parents, their job is to love you, but do not listen to their feedback about basketball. I mean, if they're going to tell you, they are going to tell you should play more. They are going to tell you should shoot more. They are going to tell you and that's because they're your parents, and that's completely fine. We have wonderful parents at the University of St. Thomas. They're really supportive, but they see a different world than we do. The reality is every coach has scarce resources. In our case, 200 minutes. So if we've got 16 guys on our team and there's 200 minutes to allocate, you start crunching the numbers, that's not very many minutes per player. And these are Division I players who have likely not met with a ton of failure yet in their career. I think there's a couple of ways to do it. And, one of it is lay out the numbers. If you look at how many Division I players there are in the state of Minnesota, for example, most years there's probably somewhere between 5 and 15. 10 has probably been a decent ballpark, although with COVID year, transfer portal, things have actually changed dramatically even in the last 5 years. So I hesitate to I probably could have given you a narrower band 5 years ago. But I think getting parents to see that if you think you want your kid to play Division I athletics, let's just look at the numbers. And if 10 kids a year come out of the state of Minnesota ballpark over the last 20 years and play Division I basketball, half of those kids are going to be probably 6'9" or taller. The other half are going to be prodigiously talented as a point guard, really quick, athletic, etc. So unless your kid falls into one of those two buckets, the odds are very slim. They're not zero, but they're very slim. And getting them to see that, and I'm a numbers geek, but in a normal distribution, the odds that somebody's going to be in one of those outlying tails is going to require something pretty special. Now, as I say all that, that's still not probably going to land if somebody's really delusional. And I think the other part is just getting kids to understand those realities, because at some point, we all go from hearing our parents and thinking what our parents say is sort of the truth to realizing, like, yeah, that's mom or dad. They want the best for me, but I got to navigate this myself. And I think that is another part of it, is not just the parents, but making sure the kids understand these are the realities. Because sometimes a kid might hear that and say, only 10 kids in the state out of thousands and thousands of players get a Division I scholarship. Well, I know I'm not one of the top 5 kids on my team. And none of the top 5 kids on my team are in the top 10 in the state. And so all of a sudden, and then, they have a decision. We all know the stories of the gym rats who put everything they had into a sport, and that's one choice. But I think it's important that parents and kids understand up front, they only control so much of this. You can say, I wanted a Division I scholarship out of college or out of high school. I didn't get one, and looking back, I completely understand why I didn't, because I was neither 6'8" plus and I was pretty slow and vertically challenged.
As I was doing research for this podcast, I know you're a big Carol Dweck fan, and I was kind of researching and figuring out, like, what are some of the signs and symptoms. We go back to that, and she said, this is interesting, I thought you'd enjoy this: 2 questions that parents can ask their kids to find out if they are perhaps a WASP. And the first question is, do you feel judged on the car ride home? Second question is, do you feel pressure to have a certain outcome in order for me to be proud of you? I'll say that again for the parents out there. These are great questions to ask if you feel like you might fall into this bucket. Do you feel judged on the car ride home? Do you feel pressure to have a certain outcome in order for me to be proud of you? What do you think of those 2 questions, Coach?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, the old joke is that when most parents drop their kids off at their youth activity, they open the door and they're like, "All right, go have fun." And then when they come back in, they say, "Did you win? Or how'd you
Yeah.
do?" And neither of those questions is bad per se, but they aren't aligned, right? Like if the goal going into it was go have fun, well, then on the car ride home, we should talk about, do we have fun? If the only goal is to win, well, then we should talk about winning. If the goal was learn something about yourself, grow, develop character, be a great teammate. I mean, to me, if you think about that, hey, go be a great teammate, get back in the car. What'd you do to help somebody today? You start thinking about that mindset shift. And I can tell you at every single level of sports, coaches and players still struggle with that all of us have inherently selfish goals, right? Or individualistic goals. And the beauty of team sports is how do you get a bunch of people working towards a common goal where they can sort of put those individual goals, they're not unimportant, they're not irrelevant, but those have to be second to the group goal. And so I think those questions that Carol Dweck lays out are really good, in part because there's been a lot written on those car rides, right? And the way I present it to parents at talks is, how many of us like when our boss is leaning over our shoulder all the time saying, come on, you can do it. Balance those books. You can do it. Well, no, nobody's going to want that happening, right? If you're a doctor and you got somebody leaning over your shoulder telling you, you can do it. And then the second part is, now you're done with a grueling day of work. How many of us want to be interrogated on the way home and question about, why did you do that back at 1:30 p.m. today? Why did you open that spreadsheet, not the other one? And so you start, to me, empathy for parents, right? If we can put ourselves in our kids' shoes, which is not an easy thing to do, but it's one of the reasons why we all say, oh, back when I was a kid. Well, no, back when I was a kid, I saw the kid world through kid lenses. Now, yes, it's easier at my age to understand what a kid should do, but the kids don't have these coping tactics. They don't have the same wisdom. And so the more we can remind ourselves, put yourself in our kid's shoes. How do I think he or she's feeling right now? And then ask them questions appropriately, or quite frankly, and again, this goes back to the well-intentioned part, sometimes just sit quietly. If they want to sit, if they just lost a tough game, I know how I was after a tough game. I know how I still am coaching after. You can ask my wife, Chancey, like she for a while, she was like, so you just drove around for a couple hours tonight? Like, what were you doing? I'm like, just driving around, like calming my thoughts. And so if I still feel that way, 25 years into coaching, there's a decent chance that 15-minute car ride home, if my son or daughter's down, just let them be down. Ask them, you want music on? No. You want anything? No. Okay. Let's go in silence, even though I know I want to help them.
That's good advice. A big part of your book, and I know a big part of your education, is with motivation. This is something we haven't talked about on the show, so I'd love to dive in about that intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. What are some practical steps? First, let's just define the differences, and then can we get into some practical steps that coaches and parents can do to foster that intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, so I was fascinated from a young age, for whatever reason, by this concept of intrinsic motivation. And, essentially, why do we do things we do? Because we enjoy them for their own sake, as opposed to for money or rewards or praise or accolades. And so the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, we could spend hours debating it. And it doesn't mean extrinsic motivation doesn't work. It absolutely does. But extrinsic motivation tends to be more fleeting. And, we can do this. I've toilet trained 2 of our 4 kids with, well, one with Skittles, one with Hershey's Kisses. And it worked like literally like a charm after nothing else worked for a year. Those work just like money can work, right? The demo I'll do in class is I'll put $100 bill up and say, hey, who would participate more if you got $100 at the end of every class? And all the students are like, yes, absolutely. And so extrinsic motivators can work, but they have to be sustainable. And they also have to be something that are guiding, hopefully, people in the right direction. And so intrinsic motivation is this concept that if we are truly following sort of our heart, our passion, typically it's marked by high levels of enjoyment. The acronym that's used oftentimes are autonomy, relatedness, and competence. That intrinsically motivated activities are ones that we're tending to freely choose to do on our own. So there's a level of autonomy. We enjoy the people we're around. So there's a relatedness or connectedness. And then competence. I'm doing it fairly well. And so that's when I talk about taking the temperature of your athletes, if a kid's feeling like I've got to play sports because my parents are pressuring me, well, autonomy is low. I'm not getting along with my teammates. Relatedness is low. I'm not playing well. Competence is low. That's a toxic cocktail that will not be good in youth sports. And then you flip it all around. And if a kid's really choosing, hey, I want to play, these are my friends, and I'm a pretty good player, those are going to be great experiences. And when I talk to parents, sometimes the saddest conversations I'll have is where I'll hear them pulling a kid off one team of really good kids. They all get along, but they want to be on the higher level AAU team. And there's a time and place for that. Make no mistake. But at certain ages, let's say you're 12, 13, 14, it's like, I want to get on this higher exposure team. Well, college coaches aren't watching 13 or 14-year-olds. And so all of a sudden you think about that, the team your kid wants to be on, you're taking them off. They're no longer with their friends. Maybe it's a little too high a level. And you literally could see a kid go from saying, this is the best thing in the world to this is the low point of my week. And so intrinsic motivation is a fuzzy concept. It's hard to nail down, but at its core, I like to think about it. is you got nothing to do in life right now, and you can't choose sleep, video games, or anything passive. You're going to go do something active. What's it going to be? Is it read a book? Is it go hiking? Is it biking? Is it have coffee with a friend? What are those things that are stimulating to you mentally, physically, spiritually that you do simply for their own sake, not for any outside pressure?
I had Coach Tim Walton. He coaches softball at Florida. He's been there for 20 years, two national championships, super successful. One of the things that he said was that's really stood out to me, Coach, was said the number one difference between a good program and a great program is the great program is filled with kids that have the I get to mentality, not I have to mentality. And he told a couple stories about how he'd pull up to the softball field at a weird time on a Sunday and these kids would be hitting. And it's like, this is bizarre. They feel like they get to do this. And I think that there's some parallels there with get to and being intrinsically motivated. My question would be, and it's probably tough to answer, is can you coach that? Can you foster an environment that has intrinsic motivated individuals, or is it kind of like you have it or you don't? How do you view that as a coach to use it as your advantage?
Yeah, I certainly I will tell you when I go out and give speeches to companies and they say, "Hey, can you motivate our employees?" My quick answer is no, absolutely. Like you've hired the wrong people if you think I'm going to come in there in 60 minutes and change things. I do think it's when we look at motivation, I usually talk about three buckets: biological, psychological, and environmental. So we're all wired a certain way that affects our thought processes, and then our environment impacts us, and there's a dynamic relationship between those three, right? Our environment can affect our biology might affect how we seek out certain environments. And so at its core, I would say we spend a lot of time trying to recruit players who already love basketball, love competition, they're good teammates, etc. You go into all those different qualities, that's a way easier thing to do. Okay. But then I think within your environment, there are lots of ways to screw up intrinsic motivation. Joe Mauer, I'll go back to that story with his family. You can do lots of things to make sure your kid's not going to be the next Joe Mauer. You can screw things up in intrinsic. I mean, quite frankly, if somebody's already intrinsically motivated, one of the best things you can do is leave them alone. And by leave them alone, I don't mean don't talk to them. Find ways to challenge them. But like the best shooters I've ever coached don't have shooting workouts that I write out for them and say, hey, here's your daily plan. The kids who want those plans, they need that and they know it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the best shooters I've ever coached, if anything I have to do, I have to tell them they're spending too much time in the gym and they're going to wear their bodies out. And so the less you do with people who are intrinsically motivated, try to guide them, try to create an environment that provokes their curiosity, their creativity, because intrinsically motivated people already love what they're doing. And so now the question is, how do you just keep challenging them in unique ways? For me, one of the litmus tests with our program is after practice, especially late in the season. We got 16 guys, and I remember late in the season this year, 16 guys, practice ends, 1, 2, 3, break it down. And 13 of the 16 were still shooting after practice. Now, they all weren't vigorous drills, right? Some of it was a friendly competition. Some wanted extra work with an assistant. But I'm looking around, I'm like, 13 of these 16 guys are still here. That's a lot different than if it's like, you have to versus get to. I have to go to practice. Once practice is done, we all scatter. And so it is a delicate balance, but I think there's trade-offs, right? I mean, if you want to promote intrinsic motivation as a coach, I do believe you're going to have to give more autonomy. You're going to have micromanaging people, whether it's athletes or employees, micromanaging people is going to lead more and more people to feel like, what time is work done? Oh, I'm done at 5. Okay, I get to go home. As opposed to giving a little more autonomy, that may lead to more mistakes. There's going to be more ugliness, right? And if you watch us play offense, our offense is very much unscripted. We have lots of principles. We ended up having the most efficient offense in the country in Division I this year out of 365 teams. And if you watch us practice, we have probably 100 different plays, and I bet you we call plays 3 or 4 or 5 times a game. But we are allowing them to be autonomous, and it's just like parenting. We'll give you a lot of autonomy in exchange for you better value the ball and you better take good shots. If you do those two things, it's like a curfew for a kid. You're going to build a lot of trust with us. We're going to build a lot of trust with you. And now go back to your word, DJ, alignment. Now you've got alignment, and we're not telling kids what to do. We're actually giving them the keys to the car.
Yeah, that's so great. Another piece that I run into sometimes with high school coaches, again, I spend a lot of time in the high school arena. This is a little bit different than college. But surprisingly, some of the things I run into time after time, coaches saying, DJ, I feel like I want it more than the kids want it. I want it more than they do, or this isn't a motivated group, and I'm the one that's putting in all this work, and I really want these wins. And sometimes I sit there on the other side of the table and I just think about what an interesting concept when the coach wants it more than the kids. What's your advice to the coaches out there who feel like they're on the side of the table, like, man, I feel like I'm showing up and I want it more than they do, keeping in mind I'm having a high school arena in my mind?
Yeah, well, I think first off, I think in a lot of cases that's right. And that's not casting any judgment. It's just if you're a coach, you've made an intentional decision that I'm going to dedicate a lot of my life to this. And so cognitive dissonance, if you've spent 25 years in something, well, it means a lot. And if you've built a program and a culture, let's be honest, that probably does mean more to you than a 14-year-old who's literally trying to figure out where's class, I'm lost again. I mean, so I don't think that's necessarily untrue. It's a different perspective, right? And I think so. So to compare how much somebody wants it with coaches and athletes, I understand that question. I don't think it's a great comparison because I don't think we're ever going to get an answer that's fruitful. I think a better question is if my athletes, if I don't think their level of care, we call it competence valuation. To what degree do you value competence? If I don't think their level of care, competence valuation is high enough, well, then I got to ask myself, why is that? It, did I keep kids on the team or did I recruit kids who don't care as much, but they're more talented? Right. And those are choices of coaches. We always say you can have anything you want in life. You can't have everything you want in life. So, yes, would I love a 7-footer who can run, jump, shoot 3-pointers? He's a straight A student. He works as hard as he can. Yes. And he's going to go to Duke. And then a year later, he's going to be in the NBA as the number one pick in the draft. Like, so we all make trade offs. So part of it is who are we populating our culture with? And if I'm populating my culture with talent over care, for example, well, then don't be surprised in the middle of the year where it's like these players don't seem that bothered that we're losing games. I think the other part of it is if I believe something strongly as a coach, and I'm not necessarily seeing, and every kid is different, right? So I think that's the other part. We got to go into every season knowing, yes, I'm coaching a team, but I'm also coaching 16 individuals who grew up differently, they were raised differently, all sorts of things. And so those individual connections, getting a kid to explain to you. So let's say I'm coaching you, DJ, and I don't think you care enough, but you're our best player. Well, probably I need to have a conversation with you that's non-judgmental to ask you to tell me a little bit more about what excites you. One of my favorite questions to ask with young athletes is what gives you the most joy in basketball? And so when I talk to freshmen about that, that's often a revealing because my hope is that they say something about the team winning a championship, a common goal, etc. But if I ask it in a way where they know that's the right answer, I'm not going to get the truth. What I really want to hear is, okay, maybe what gives this guy the most joy is scoring. Okay, well, he's a really good scorer. So let's find ways to make sure he scores a lot. But then how do I get him to see the beauty of other parts of the game? And so when as coaches, we expect people to care to the same level as we do about the same things. I think this might sound harsh, but I think it's naive because we had lots of teammates who chose not to go into coaching, maybe partly because to them sports was a fun diversion, but they want to go do something else.
I liked the framework of the arc. You went over it really quick. Can we just revisit it for a second? And can you spell out what those are and maybe give an example before we go on to the next topic?
Yeah, so the arc to success, I call it ARC, and this stems from DC and Ryan at University of Rochester, their self-determination theory. But the arc to success, the A is autonomy, the R is relatedness, and the C is competence. And so even in college, and actually this happens in Division I sports sometimes, right? Kids grow up and they think, I've got to get a Division I scholarship. I got to get a Division I scholarship. And then they get there, and all of a sudden you look around, and there's 12 other guys who have been nothing but the best player in every team they've ever been on, and they're all on full scholarship. And I may look around and think, I'm the worst player in the gym right now. I'm still a Division I player, so I'm still really, but it's easy to forget that, right? Like literally in a span of 6 months, you go from being the best player maybe in your state, and you're a state champ, and you're playing against 16 and 17-year-olds, and you are dominant. And literally 6 months later, you're the same 18-year-old. You have not regressed in any way, shape, or form, but you're now playing against 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds. If they've done their job, they're probably going to kick your butt most days in practice, and that can be humbling for that 18-year-old. And so the autonomy piece is oftentimes reorienting college athletes to realizing like, hey, you've done this all your life, and figuring out, do you really love this or do you love being good?
Mm.
Because some people love being good, and that gets into the C, the competence, but that's a different love of a sport than I just love the process of this and being in the gym every day. And so When I look at athletes who are struggling, the autonomy, it might be you're away from home for the first time in college, and you realize, I like my name getting called over the loudspeaker, or I liked pep rallies at high school, or my parents every night over dinner, we chatted about my team. Well, you get to college at St. Thomas, there's 6,500 students here, undergrads, and it's a beautiful campus, and our basketball team is well supported. We have sellout crowds, but the reality is, our guys aren't walking to class being besieged by autograph seekers. And I always tell them that, like, you're not a basketball player. You're a student who studies this, and you happen to play basketball as well. So the autonomy piece, getting them to think about why are you playing. Relatedness, there are times where clicks form within teams, and this is harder as a coach sometimes to know, right? Sometimes it's after the season you find out certain things that you had no idea were going on during the course of the season, but maybe two people were butting heads a little bit, fighting over, it might have been playing time, it might have been friendship, might have been gossip, whatever. Um, and then the competence piece is somebody playing well. And typically I'll find, if I can have a candid conversation with an athlete and make sure they're playing for the right reasons and they still love it, they're getting along with their teammates. Well, okay, maybe you're just struggling. Okay, now so it gives me an avenue of, okay, let's go at the competence. Do we need to watch more film? Do you need to get in the gym more? Do you just need to relax? But if it's a relationship thing, then it's okay. How do we get at that? Because sometimes that relationship is absolutely affecting performance, but the performance is going to be fine as soon as the teammates feel like they're back in sync.
Yeah, well said. This is the Coaching Beyond the Scoreboard series, Coach. And what's so cool about this is right beforehand, you said tomorrow you're getting coffee with the guy that I went to school with and played for you. And it's, to me, when I think of coaching beyond the scoreboard, the word that comes to me is transformational coaching. And transformational coaching to me is kind of hard because you can't really measure it in the moment, but it's something that you can see years later. I go back to Tim Walton. He's talking about transformational coaching being when he gets text messages from girls that he coached, and it's their family, or doing the gator chop, and they're staying in touch with their coach 10, 15 years after. And so for you to get coffee tomorrow with somebody who graduated 10 years ago, that's transformational coaching. That is coaching beyond the scoreboard, in my opinion. I'd love to hear from you because I think you're one of the best at it, at being a transformational coach. What do you think are the keys to being a transformational coach and coaching beyond the scoreboard?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's very kind. And I do think it's one of probably our biggest responsibility as a coach, right? In the same way that I talked at the beginning, if we're going to ask parents, what do you want for your kids in sports? And they say character development and perseverance and handling adversity. And as coaches, we better endorse many of those as well. Winning matters, but first off, we know from a lot of research, putting too much pressure on people to win doesn't typically help their performance. In fact, early on as a coach, one of our players, who you would probably know from your time at St. Thomas, he came up to me and goes, Coach, it's weird. In high school, we always talked about winning, and we didn't win very much. Here, we don't ever talk about winning, and we've won 4 straight conference titles while I've been here. And that doesn't guarantee you anything, right? But again, it goes back to, most of us don't respond really, really well to pressure, right? When you think about, okay, you're shooting a free throw at the end of a game. Well, we've all done that. You want to go back to muscle memory and just do the things you're really good at. So screaming out, this is a really big free throw, that's not going to help. So part of our job as coaches, I think, is to help create conditions under which our players are going to perform best. But that still pales in comparison to the transformational coaching, which is, how do we create relationships and a really a broader perspective where, Connor Nord, who you're talking about, who graduated in 2015, I mean, he's gone on to coach in college, and I'm so proud of the work he's doing. I'll never forget, his dad sent me a note the day after a banquet, and Connor came in right after a national title in 2011. 2016, we won it the year he left. So he didn't win one in his 4 years, but we did win 4 conference titles, went to the tournament 4 times, went to a Final Four. Connor's one of the all-time best players in the history of our program. And I remember his dad sent me one of the nicest notes Toby did right the day after our banquet, because Connor, the seniors, got up and spoke. And the end of the year was painful. We lost on a buzzer beater, ended up on ESPN, the Sports Center top 10, but we weren't the top 10. It was the other team hitting it. And that's how Connor's career ended as a college athlete. And we had a top team we thought could win the national title. And his dad, I still have the note somewhere, but he said, that loss was really painful. It took a while to get over. Excuse me. But after hearing Connor speak at the banquet, everything made sense. Like literally seeing what he just said about his experience and his friendships and what they've learned and the ups and the downs. Would we have loved to win a national title in 2015? Absolutely. But in some strange way, your culture gets tested by losses where you see, like, hey, regardless of winning or losing, Connor's going to be really, really good in the game of life. And I go back, you went to Lakeville South. Ryan Sarlo went to Lakeville North. He ends up winning the national title, MVP of that game in 2016. But I still remember Connor Nord mentoring Ryan in the gym when Connor was a sophomore starting. Ryan was a freshman, not playing very much, and he just took him under his wing. And so when you think about your culture and transformation and who you recruit and how you try to build them, I still remember that literally would have been the fall of 2012. And I'd watch Connor, and he was tireless. And we've all known guys who kind of like to keep their secrets to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Connor was doing the opposite with this freshman who, frankly, could have been a threat to him. Instead, the two of them started together and made up, I thought, the best front court in our conference and one of the best in the country. But, and I'm sorry to ramble, but like literally, you look at Connor Nord and Ryan Sarla and the relationship they forged, that to me is what good cultures have, because now you have a guy like Connor who knows I'm really good and I'm going to help this other guy who's really good, who under certain circumstances might take my playing time, but under ideal circumstances, we're both going to take this program to a new level, which the two of them did.
And in my opinion, the culture starts from the coach. And so I want to give you some credit because you create the environment where kids feel like they could do some of these things. So I'd love to hear from a coach's perspective. How do you create and instill the environment? I think one strategy was not over talk about winning. We're not talking about statistics and winning as much. What's another couple strategies that you've kind of stumbled upon over the years to create the environment that's more transformational and really lives beyond the scoreboard?
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I think I've been really fortunate. Something told me to go study motivation, social psychology, and essentially, I mean, I tell all our students on campus, I'm admittedly biased, but everybody should take a social psychology class. I love teaching motivation, but everybody in the world should take a social psychology class because essentially it's the study of how our environment impacts us.
That's right.
And some of the worst human behaviors, right? Aggression, crime, et cetera, where you look at, and you hear this invariably when somebody's arrested, and friends, family will say, that's not who he is, or that's not who she is. And they're not lying. They're saying, yeah, 99.9% of the time, this person isn't doing that. Yet that night at that time, that did happen. And so both of those things can be true. And so social psychology is all about two things: the power of our environment, how it can shape us as human beings, and then how each one of us within that environment has our own subjective perception of reality. I know you've talked about reframing things before. And so, in many ways, social psychologists, if you want to understand behavior, we need to understand who's the person, what's their environment, and how are they perceiving that environment. Because the same two people, just
Mhm.
like if you and I go to a movie, we can
That's
walk
right.
out of that movie in very disparate views of what that movie is like, even though our environment was the same, because we might be different. And so, as a coach, I worked with Judy Harakevich at the University of Wisconsin, legendary social psychologist. And in many ways, I feel more like a social psychologist as a basketball coach than I do an X's and O's coach.
Mm.
Because it is about how are we creating this environment holistically, but then within each team there's subcultures, and so you've got to create an environment where it might be the music you play, the food you eat. What choices do you give your players? For example, do you give them a little autonomy? Um, for me, some of it is just, and I think this is a humility. I think I'm pretty good at what I do. I don't think I'd want to listen to myself that often. And so my assistant coaches, I give a ton of autonomy to them. Mike Maker runs our offense. I'd run our offense for 15 years in Division 3. He runs our offense in Division 1. Kenny Lowe runs our defense. Cam Rundles does personnel and individual tendencies. And we have three other young assistants: Josh Rodenbiker, Kevin Shield, and Danny Johnson, who each have their own niche. And so part of it for me, honestly, is I like operating at 50,000 feet. I can be the quote unquote social psychologist, and also allowing really, really talented coaches to do their job. And I think I'm self-aware enough to know that we all get sick of the same voice. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there's different ways of leading, but being sort of the one voice and the dictator, that's not my personality, nor do I think it works very well for the kind of culture that we want to have. So I try to say as little as possible so that when I do say something, the players know this is really, really important.
What's your thoughts on punishment, coach?
I think punishment, again, like extrinsic motivators, it can certainly serve serve a purpose. I mean, I've got a almost 4-year-old daughter right now, and she is testing me. So I'm getting to that limit of like, well, if you do this, then this is going to happen. And because connecting those dots for kids is important, and natural consequences are beautiful, they're the best, but they don't always happen, right? Natural consequences don't always happen where you say, well, don't do this because something bad could happen. Well, we all know something bad doesn't happen every single time. And so I think punishment's important. Um, but I think, there's the age of reason, and you start thinking about when are people able to think logically. I'll give an example for us: turnovers. If you come in my office, you see on different walls, so, up above, unselfish,
Mhm.
smart, skilled, tough. That's who we want in our culture. Over on that wall, it says value the ball, value your teammates. And we have been among the nation's leaders in turnovers, I think, virtually every year for the last 10 or 12 seasons, Division 3 and Division 1. In fact, our first year of Division 1, we started the same 5 guys we had in Division 3, and we led the country in fewest turnovers in Division 1 with
Holy
five
cow.
former Division 3 players. And so I say that because there's lots of ways to do it. Um, Punishment would be, you turn the ball over, you come out of the game. We don't do that. You watch us play, we give guys a lot of autonomy. Now, if you turn the ball over a lot, you're just not going to play. So once you sort of earn, like, hey, you're a good decision maker. Okay, DJ made a quick turnover early in the game. Why do I want to pull you out? And to me, controlling anxiety and keeping our players at sort of optimal levels of arousal is really important. And about the only time I'm really going to yell is if somebody's being lazy or if they're mentally not focused. And those two can go hand in hand, but physically lazy or mentally not, then I'm going to yell. But if you watch me, people are like, do you ever yell? Well, if again, and I'm intense, I'm competitive, but to just yell and scream for the sake of yelling and screaming, shame on me that number one, we haven't recruited the right players. Like, we recruited guys who are intrinsically motivated and want to work hard. We don't have to yell and scream. I don't want to coach effort every day. I want to coach people and I want to coach basketball. And so I do think punishment, um, depending on the age, can have a place. I would say getting people to understand there are consequences to your actions, and then trying to set those up where it doesn't feel like I'm being punished because I'm a bad kid, right? And that's always the danger with young kids is, the other day my daughter, I forget, we had a mishap with something, and she's like, do you still love me, daddy? And it was like this heartbreaking thing. I'm like, of course I love you. And I hardly ever get upset with her just because she's so sweet and cute that it's hard to get upset with her. But that morning I was disappointed with her because she hadn't done something she said she was going to do. And so on the way to school, she's saying, do you still love me, daddy? So then we had to get into this discussion about, oh, I'm always going to absolutely love you. However, I can be upset and still love you. I can be disappointed and still love you. I'll always love you. And so I think that's the danger of punishment, is you can flirt with that line of like, does this person care about me anymore? And if our players don't think we care about them, they do not care how many X's and O's we know. I know that.
That's right. It's kind of that love and discipline, love and discipline, love and discipline. The best coaches have a little bit of both. It's not just one, it's not the other. Dabo Sweeney talks about love and discipline, but love's got to come first because they got to know that you love them before you can really start disciplining them. But that having that balance, that's crucial.
Yeah, and there's great research on parenting styles. If coaches out there want to read about it, John Burry, actually, who's been in our psych department for 50 years here at St. Thomas, he did groundbreaking research on this back in the 70s and 80s. And, there's permissive parenting, which is sort of, hey, I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to let you do things. And hey, there's strengths to that. Your kid's probably going to like you a lot of days. However, we know what permissive parenting can lead to. Authoritarian parenting, which is, you're in, basically, I'm telling you what to do. This is a dictatorship. And we also know, hey, authoritarian parenting, kids will color inside the lines most of the time. And once they get to college, suddenly they've got a lot of decisions that they may not be prepared to make. And so, John Burry's research and others shows that authoritative parenting was sort of is that blend of love and discipline where there are guidelines, but there's also love. That's harder to navigate, right? It's like most things in life, it's easier to live in the extremes. If I'm just permissive all the time or I'm a
Hmm.
dictator all the time,
Hmm.
those are easier because the world's black and white. But I always like to say the different shades of gray, whether it's parenting or coaching, if you're willing to live in those shades of gray, that's sort of the art and science of it. But you got to know every day is going to be a grind, right? I joke that anytime you go to bed and think one of two things: oh, I got my kids all figured out, or I got my team all figured out, by tomorrow morning, the answer will be absolutely not. And so it's sort of embracing, as a coach, embracing the messiness of, hey, you got a team, you got a lot of kids from different backgrounds, different families, different parenting styles, different abilities, different goals. That's okay. That's the mosaic. How do we make this a beautiful mosaic and know that there's going to be stuff every single day? And as coaches, embracing that, I think, helps us keep our stress level low and our perspective more clear and objective on what does my team need from me right now.
How important is it for college programs and high school programs to have core values? And on top of that, how do you do a great job? Because I know you do a great job. How do you do a great job at bringing the core values to life? And so they're not just words on the wall. So how important is it to have them as a high school program, a college program? And how do you bring them to life so you're actually living by them and you're not just putting them on the wall?
Yeah, I do think, and people can do it a lot of different ways. So I would never say one way is the right way, but I do think if our players can't recite most of what I value, so if you look around my wall, excellence is not an act, but a habit, Aristotle. So that was a quote from a philosophy class here. Dare to be great is another one of our mantras that came from my old high school baseball coach, Dennis Denning. Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which our players could not recite, but I had to memorize and I explained to them why. So my three big goals for our team are dare to be great. I want you to have some audacious goal in life, dare to dream, and then chase it tirelessly. Two, excellence is not an act, but a habit. As much as I want you to dare to dream, and as much as those two national titles we won were special, winning 12 straight conference titles to me in Division III meant more because it was that sustained excellence of this is a group of people year over year over year that the culture is absolutely improving itself. And then the categorical imperative, which I won't go into, but that deals more with making decisions that if you act a certain way, does the world get a little better or a little worse? And so those would be three of the things we live by. But I mean, I've got lots of phrases. I will say this: in Division I, we have a lot of media coverage, and so when I get to listen to our players in press conferences, that is actually a great litmus test. Rather than quizzing them and they have to give me the right answers on a piece of paper, if I just listen to what they say to reporters, and unselfishness is one thing that it's just like that is a theme of how we play. Our depth, our togetherness, just competitive joy is a phrase we use a lot. That if you watch us play, I hope you're like, those guys are absolutely ferocious competitively, and they're having a lot of fun doing it, and they love playing with each other. So that phrase is actually, I have, when you've coached 25 years, you start accumulating phrases. And if I start thinking all our players should remember all the ones I've come up with over the years, I'm like, hold on, I got 25 years of experience. They got 6 months of this. But competitive joy, at least recently, has become the phrase for me that embodies our program, that if you come watch us play and you see that, we're doing something right. And our players know that. And that means if you're the star DJ or you're the guy on the end of the bench who's a walk-on, we better see competitive joy when we're scoring baskets. And so we spend a lot of time trying to praise that too, that the beauty of being on a team, when you go back for reunions 20, 30 years from now, nobody's going to want to hang out with the guy who scored the most points. They're going to want to hang out with their friends and the best guys. And so, in this era, the transfer portal and NIL and everything has become a little more transient. I do think that is something we've really doubled down on in our culture, is intrinsic motivation and people who really, really believe in the power of something bigger than themselves.
What do you think coaches are missing out on if they don't have core values? I think in college you see it pretty much all the time. There's probably some programs that don't, but in high school there some do and some don't. What are coaches missing out on if they don't put words on paper and try to figure out who are we and who do we want to be? What are they potentially missing out on?
Well, I think part of it, all of us, right? We all attend to things differently, right? And whether you're a verbal listener, or a verbal learner, visual learner, I think having something concrete where everybody in the organization should be able to say this, right? Like whether it's media training in our athletic department, our VP of athletics, Phil Eston, has done just an incredible job navigating this D3 to D1 transition. Well, one of the phrases he talks about all the time is comprehensive excellence. And there's the 4 C's, and it's competition, classroom, community, character. Like those are things I tell our players. If you don't know those 4 things, like I better know those 4 things. If I don't know those 4 things, I ought to be in trouble with my boss. But if you want to understand what we're all about, you better know what comprehensive excellence is. And so, I think something simple, our mission statement, we rewrote that at St. Thomas probably 20 years ago. And I was not on the committee to do it, but I was on the faculty senate at the time. And I remember Father Deese said he wanted it short enough that it could fit on the back of a matchbook. Now, that dates us because people aren't walking around smoking very often anymore, thankfully. But his point was our old mission statement was so long, nobody knew it. Well, now our mission statement, if you look at it at St. Thomas, it's 30 words. And I tell our players all the time, you should memorize this, because if you don't understand the mission statement of St. Thomas, if you don't understand our athletic department and the idea of comprehensive excellence, and then if you don't understand in our program competitive joy, unselfish, skilled, smart, tough, well, then we're going to have 16 people that are more likely to not all have 180-degree different views of the world, but it is going to be slightly different. And when you think, I go back to the word you used at the outset, when you think about alignment, the best teams, the best organizations, the best cultures, they have an alignment because everybody understands working hard is great, but if there's not alignment, you got a bunch of people working hard for different things, working hard with an alignment to a common goal. And I think words, particularly if they're short, if they have something catchy to them. So young, I think about high school kids, what are they going to remember? Even in a timeout, we go into a timeout, it's easy for me to want to say 10 things. I almost always say 2 or 3 things, and that's it. Because the reality is in 90 seconds or so, I want to give them a break. I want to let them relax. So what are they actually going to remember? It does not matter what we fill their head. I could say, hey, DJ shoots 38.2% on threes, 48.7 on twos, 56.4 at the rim, 67.9 on free throws. His ATO is 3.1. What does that mean when they're actually guarding you in the game? And so just like scientific Occam's razor, the simplest theories win out. What's the simplest, littlest amount of information we can give our athletes that will allow them to play fast and free in a way that's aligned towards our goals?
So what could that sound like? Bring me in a huddle.
Bring me a huddle. Okay. Let's say we're down 10 with 3 minutes left. All right, guys, listen, we're down 10. We got the ball. We're not going to hit any home runs here. We've got to win 4 possessions in a row. We're going to run, and then we'll call out a play. We're going to run this, get a good shot. We got to get a stop. We're doubling the post next time, get the ball out of their dominant post hands, and then we got to get out and run. Now, that's all nice. That sounds good. If you're down 10 with 3 minutes left, the odds you're winning are probably 5%, right? So as a coach at this point, I'm not saying, hey, we got a 5% chance of winning. I'm trying to instill confidence, saying, here's what we need to do. If we can score, which is about a 1 and 2 proposition, and if we stop them, 1 and 2 proposition, and then I want them to feel free and confident. So that's where I'm saying get out and run. All of a sudden, if that 10-point lead goes to 5, and they call a timeout, and now our gym's rocking, and it's going nuts, and music's blasting, all of a sudden, we actually feel like we've got the momentum. Reality is, if we don't score, they go down and score, we're down 12, probably the game's over. And so I think as coaches, while maintaining reality, it's how do we keep you focused on really the next possession? I mean, I've got a thing in my office and it's got all the titles that we've won, a list of and the only word on it is next. And with the idea that to me is another word that's so powerful for our athletes, that it's great the legacy that's been left here. It's great what we might have done last week. It does not matter what's next. And in a timeout, that to me, the beauty of basketball is you're going to have about 70 possessions on offense, 70 possessions on defense. And it's not freaking out about 1 or 2 of them. It's how do we put 70 really good possessions together on offense, 70 really good possessions on defense. And when you talk about coaching with college athletes, it's a little easier, but I'm going to try to link that for some of them to finance, right? Some guys like to invest. It's like, okay, let's imagine you got 140 opportunities to invest. One of them goes wrong, you can't lose your mind. You move on to the next one. Some of our guys major in psychology, some major in education, whatever it is. How do we get them to understand that really sports are a metaphor for life, and that whether it's every possession, every day, every relationship, you don't have to be perfect, but you've got to have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish. You got to do it with other people and have synergy. And then you got to do it again and again and again and again.
Man, that's some super, super great advice. High level coaching there to try to fit it into what they're interested in and how they see it. I like this phrase that basketball is an emotional game full of random events. I could really just say sports are an emotional game full of random events. So that's your strategy for your student athletes. Coach, how do you stay neutral in a game that is emotional and full of random events?
We should get my wife on here because she would say that I don't. My wife's the star in the family. She founded a charter school 13 years ago, Prodeo Academy. And so when you talk about intrinsic motivation, Chancey does more incredible work in the Twin Cities. She's battled cancer twice in the last 6 years. She knows virtually nothing about basketball, but she gives me the best advice, and she always tells me, smile. She's like, when you smile, your players play better. Now, there's a chicken and the egg, right? Because it's a heck of a lot easier to smile when 3-point shots are going down. But I do think as a coach, there is absolutely, you're trying to operate on probably 3 or 4 levels, right? Where you're managing the game and strategy, you're communicating with your assistants, you're trying to talk to the referees about what's going on. And then you're also absolutely trying to do that in a way where you don't get too emotional, which is not easy, right? Like I can absolutely remember games where I got too emotional, whether that's excited because we got off to a 12-0 lead or angry about officials call. And it took my focus away from what we just talked about next. And so that's something I try to be vulnerable with the team and talk about that because point guards have that duty in a lot of ways in basketball too, right? Where as a player, you try to earn minutes and then you earn a starting spot and then you're a really good player. And by the end of the year, like Drake Dobbs this year was a fifth-year point guard grad student from Eden Prairie. But when you get at a certain level, it's like now as the point guard, you're not just trying to be a good point guard. You're worried about did our shooting guard, how's he feeling? Is he confident? How do I get him an easy basket? We got a center with foul trouble. How do I? And all of a sudden, the level of emotional intelligence you have to have as either a point guard or a coach goes up dramatically. And you have to almost strip yourself of any selfishness, right? So the best point guards, they may score a lot of points, but they can't care about that because if they do, they're not thinking about all the other stuff. And as a coach, I think when I'm operating at my best, I'm as selfless as can be, that I'm not thinking about anything other than at 50,000 feet, like a social psychologist, what does this team need right now? Forget about the fact I'm upset about a referee's call. Forget about the fact I'm frustrated by something one of our players did. I've got to be completely focused. And that's, every sport is different, right? Basketball has a certain ebb and flow. Football, you get 30 seconds in between plays to really reassess, and you got guys who are on offense and defense, and it's a different challenge. Basketball, what I try to talk to our guys about, I think the most unique thing, and soccer and hockey have certain elements that are way more free flowing, but basketball, I think the unique thing is you do have to play offense and defense, right? And that happens like this. And positionally, you can invert an awful lot. Whereas soccer, like if you're a striker, you tend to be the shape of your unit in both hockey and soccer don't change, and basketball can change completely. And so the decision making, autonomy, and opportunities that basketball players have in baseball, if you're a best hitter, all right, I'm hitting you third or fourth. We know when you're hitting. In basketball, you might be our best player, but we got a guy who's trying to impress a pro scout and he's taken 8 straight shots. And it's like, what's going on here? And so teaching decision making, self awareness, humility, those are 3 things. The longer I've coached, the more I talk about that than I do X's and O's. And
Oof.
I've got to be really clear headed if I'm going to do that.
Man, that's really cool. Man, coach, has been a lot of fun. I want to close down with a piece of advice question. So two different avatars I want you to think of. We'll go to the parents first. So sports parents listening, what's a piece of advice or what is something that you would shed upon all the parents out there if they have a youth athlete? Maybe it's a 6th grader or maybe it's a 6-year starter at St. Thomas, whatever it is. What's a piece of advice that you would give to the parents out there?
Yeah, that I don't want to say it's easy, but I think it's pretty simple. Twofold. One, what are your goals? So, and you asked earlier, should these be written out for coaches, athletes, etc.? I think families should have statements about what do we want out of youth sports posted in the kitchen. So now, after a tough loss, a frustrating game, if we look up there and they're like, be a great teammate, learn from defeats, be humble. Okay, well, I struck out 4 times. I might actually be doing A plus on all 3 of those things today. I'm really humble. I struck out. I was a good teammate. I kept cheering for my team. So, number one, what are the goals? Remind yourself of that over and over and over and over again on the way to games, while watching the game, when you're frustrated, and on the way home. What are the goals? And if the goals are for my son or daughter to develop in all these ways, if that's happening, forget about the strikeouts, forget about the wins or losses, frankly. And then the second piece I would add is to enjoy the journey. Like it does go by in a blink of an eye. And I cannot tell you the number of parents who, once their kids get done with sports, they look back and they laugh at all these moments, but they say, I was so stressed by all this stuff. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but our worrying doesn't help. Maybe that's the best way. Our frustration doesn't help. And so when people see me in sports, I'm usually off in the corner and they're like, you look so calm. Why? You don't say anything. I'm like, yeah, because it doesn't matter. It's 5th grade basketball or it's 5th grade baseball. I hope they're having fun. I don't have enough emotional equity. I've sort of committed to St. Thomas basketball. That's where I'm investing a lot. And the rest of it, I just want to see them have fun and push themselves and be a good teammate. Like if they aren't working hard, aren't being a good teammate, that's going to be a problem. But more than anything, what are your goals and enjoy the journey because it goes quickly.
Second piece of advice for the avatar, for the coaches out there. Knowing what you know now, what's something that you wish you knew when you got in, or what's a piece of advice that you wish more coaches knew, maybe specifically in high school or college realm?
I think as best we can. And most coaches, I always say, coaches different in their level of ability, but I've never met a coach who's trying to lose, right? Coaches have good intentions. And so I think as a young coach, it's easy to focus too much on winning, and winning does matter. But I actually, the longer I've coached, the more I have felt that the more I can put myself, empathy again, put myself in the perspective of the athlete I'm talking to or the team. I think that's going to lead to more winning. And you have to trust that. But if I do trust that, there's no guarantee winning. It's a zero sum situation. That's the hard part about sports. You can have the two best teams in the world. We see it every year in the Super Bowl. And on Monday morning, everybody's going to second guess the team that lost. It's like, hold on a second. These are the two best teams in the world. Maybe one team just beat the other team, but they both have worked tirelessly for 6 months. And so I think that's one of the things, is reminding ourselves as young coaches, there's no guarantee to winning, but trusting science does tell us a lot about when do we perform optimally. And we know that when we're cool, calm, collected, excited, positive emotions, and we feel a connection to people. And so that empathy piece, having kids, I think helps. You don't have to have kids to be a really good coach, but I think it has helped me in the sense of, you start thinking like, okay, if this were my son or daughter, what message do I want to land? And that doesn't mean you always are telling them what they want to hear. Sometimes it's just got to be the cold, hard truth. But how do I deliver that in a way where maybe we lost a tough game? I'm not angry about the loss right now. I'm talking to this young person about their goals, their development. And so I think that would be the biggest thing, is trusting that investment in the development of young athletes, it can lead to both higher levels of winning and better outcomes for that athlete.
Hmm. Coach, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for joining the Coach Should Be on the Scoreboard series. Last question: how can my listeners best support you and your program?
Well, hey, I appreciate that. Come on out, watch us at St. Thomas. I think we're one of the coolest stories in college basketball. We jumped from D3 to D1 4 years ago, and the last 3 years we won 19, 20, and 24 games. We keep getting better. We got a new arena opening next year. It's a special story in the state of basketball, where there's only two Division I schools here in Minnesota. And follow me on Twitter, whatever. I put out content on motivation, and you want to check out the book. I'm happy to get you a copy of this. But more than anything, I think sports have been a special part of my life. And I always tell people, don't write a book to get rich, because you're not going to get rich, at least unless you're a New York Times bestseller. You're not going to get rich writing a book. But it was a labor of love, because when you look at how many millions of kids play youth sports, and if we can have some direct or indirect impact on those kids where they actually learn the lessons from sports that we all want them to, the world's going to be a little bit better place. And then I think we've used sports as the vehicle that we all aspire for it to be.
Man, so much wisdom. Coach, thanks for your time.
Thank you, DJ. Appreciate it.